the best!
Hey guys, welcome back to math class. Today we're talking about probability and how to express it as a fraction, percent, and a ratio. For this lesson, what we're going to be talking about is the probability of different outcomes using a singular six-sided dice. So let's get started. So for a fraction, all we do for our numerator, that is the desired outcomes, and our denominator is the total possible outcomes. So for our six-sided dice, it would just simply be there are 6 outcomes. So as we are giving several different scenarios and multiple desired ways of giving the information, we are going to have our chart starting with our desired outcome and our fraction. For our first desired outcome, we're hoping to roll a 1. So what that means is that our desired outcomes, well, there's only one option, that's the 1, and the total possible outcomes is going to be 6. There's 6 sides on the dice, so our first fraction is just going to be 1 out of 6. Our second option is we're hoping to roll an odd number, so a 1, 3, or 5. So what that means is we have 3 desired outcomes, so our numerator is 3, and once again our denominator remains at 6 total possible outcomes, which we can simplify into 1/2. Our final desired outcome is a number greater than 4, so that leaves us with a 5 or a 6. So our numerator would be 2, and our denominator would remain at 6, and we can simplify this into 1/3. Our next step is to convert the fraction into a decimal. We'll go over this fairly quickly because we've done this lots before. We just take the numerator and divide by the denominator. So 1/6 just becomes 0.16 repeated. 3/6 or 1/2 is 5/10, and 1/3 gives us 0.33 repeated. And our percentage, we just take our decimal and multiply by 100, and so what we end up getting is 16.6 repeated percent, 50%, and 33.3 repeated percent. Our final step is to calculate the ratio. And for that, we remember that the ratio is slightly different than the fraction. The fraction compares the desired outcomes to the total possible outcomes. The ratio compares the desired outcomes to the undesired outcomes. So what we do is we take our desired outcomes, and that'll be the same as the numerator for the fraction. For our undesired outcomes, all we do is take the total and we subtract the number of desired outcomes. So in our first scenario, we're hoping to roll a 1. So in that case, we end up having 1 desired outcome and 5 undesired outcomes. So for our second scenario, we've got 3 possible outcomes, which leaves us 3 undesired outcomes. So our ratio is 3:3, or we can simplify that to 1:1. And finally, for our last one, we've got our 5 and 6, so 2 possible outcomes. So we end up with 2 possible outcomes, 4 undesired outcomes, so 2:4, or we can simplify that to 1:2. What a ratio tells us essentially is how often we would get a desired outcome compared to getting an undesired outcome. So for 1, we would end up rolling a 1 time for every 5 times that we don't roll a 1. For an odd number, we would end up rolling them the same rate. So for every 1, we should receive 1 undesired outcome, and for over 4 we end up with, for every 1 that we roll, we should roll 2 undesired outcomes. Alright, well that is the end for today. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to message or call me, and I will see you next lesson.
Oh no, it's over.